This episode is brought to you by the American Homebrewers Association, a community of more than 40,000 fermentation aficionados. Join the association or renew your membership by January 4th and choose a free brewing book to add to your library. Details at homebrewersassociation.org. That's homebrewersassociation.org. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, December 17th, 2020. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Glenn Cole, brewer at Hofbrauhaus in St. Louis, talks about brewing Munich Dunkel and the fascinating decoction method his brewery employs. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows. And if you go to basicbrewingshop.com, you can find our DVDs and our brewer's logbooks. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook as well. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing, and thanks to everybody who's helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. Let's start off with some huge news from our friends and sponsors at Imperial Organic Yeast. Imperial Yeast is expanding to the East Coast with their new production facility in Philadelphia. Phase 1 of opening will include shipping their 4 guaranteed in-stock strains, A38 Juice, A07 Flagship, L13 Global, and G03 Dieter to commercial customers. Production build-out is underway, and Casey at Imperial says they hope to offer their full lineup as well as homebrew pouches mid-2021. So, that is excellent news. Imperial is growing, and it's no wonder. You know we love Imperial Organic Yeast. My stir plate is dusty because I don't use it anymore for moderate gravity 5-gallon batches. And in my experience, if I pitch one of those 200 billion cell packets in the afternoon, my airlock is bubbling by bedtime. This new East Coast facility will let Imperial improve on their already top-notch customer service. And this has been in the works for quite a while now, and I'm very excited for everybody at Imperial. Ask your local homebrew store for Imperial Organic Yeast and check them out at imperialyeast.com. That is great news. This week we hear of some mixed brewing news coming out of Little Rock, Arkansas. You may remember my visit to Rebel Kettle in Little Rock last year to record an episode. Well, since then, Rebel Kettle rebranded to East 6th Brewing Company, and then the pandemic happened. They had to close their tasting room, and all kinds of things happened, and East 6th announced this week that they are closing their doors. So that's really sad news for Arkansas beer. I'm really sad to hear that. However, there is a silver lining to that. The neighboring Lost 40 Brewing, which has had a good year this year, has announced that they are taking over the former East 6th location and plan to add it as a new restaurant and specialty brewing company focused on small batch beers. So the target for opening the new project is in spring of 2021. So condolences to the 6th Street Brewing crew, and best of luck to Lost 40 on the new venture. It just goes to show you how unequal the effects of the pandemic have been this year. In my homebrew news, and I would classify that as good so far, I transferred the 2-gallon batch of Midnight Wheat Black Ale that I talked about last week into a Mr. Beer fermenter, and I added 3.5 ounces or 100 grams of sweetened shredded coconut that I toasted in a pan. And after it sits for a while, I'm going to bottle that. It should be ready to bottle within, 3 or 4 days. Really looking forward to that. I anticipate a beer tasting, kind of like German chocolate or maybe a Mounds bar. Somebody on Instagram asked why sweetened coconut instead of the unsweetened shredded coconut, and it's just what I had on hand. I had a bunch left over from making a coconut cream pie for Thanksgiving. And it toasted up really nicely. And I don't know if it's because it had that sugar on there or not, but in the pan it toasted up really nice and tasted really good. So really good, high expectations for that. I'm going to take next week off from posting the podcast to eat more pie, frankly. I hope you're able to spend some good quality family time and to decompress a little bit next week. And then the week after, we will return for the disaster show. So look forward to that. But before next week, there's still time to do some Christmas and or holiday shopping at highgravitybrew.com. Our friends Desiree and Dave from High Gravity in Tulsa are having a sale on money. A sale on gift certificates, which you can use as money. Say you're like me and your significant other has no idea what to give you present-wise. Or if you have a brewer or a winemaker on your gift list, a highgravitybrew.com gift certificate is an excellent choice. And now through the holidays, highgravitybrew.com gift certificates are now 10% off in any denomination. So Santa can save 10% on gift certificates that can be used on beer ingredients, beer and wine kits, and of course, on awesome Wordhog electric brewing systems. You know I love my electric brew-in-a-bag system with the Wordhog EBC 130 controller, but you can take the pain out of propane with 2 or 3 vessel systems too, from 5 gallons to 2 barrels. HighGravityBrew.com has you covered. And High Gravity will work with you to build a system that's just right for you. They sell electric systems from other manufacturers too, if you want to go in that direction. Tell Santa to head on over to highgravitybrew.com this holiday season to take advantage of 10% off gift certificates at family-owned and operated highgravitybrew.com. Okay, let's get right into it. Let's talk to Glenn Cole about Decocting Munich Dunkel. Well, Glenn Cole, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, the last time we talked about a fundraising beer that you came up with at Midwest Ale Works, and that's still going strong. Is that still going on out there?
It sure is. I just had my 4-hour drive from St. Louis back up to the Quad Cities and listened to a couple podcasts, and one of them was with Carson King. He was on some kind of farming podcast, and they were talking about it, and he says that there's more Iowa breweries still signing up, still brewing, still putting out different variants with their own little twist on it, and continuing to raise money for Iowa farmers.
Well, great. But you at that time you were splitting your time between Midwest Ale Works and Hofbrauhaus down in St. Louis, but you decided to choose one suitor out of the two.
Yep, I am 100% full at Hofbrauhaus in St. Louis now, and it's just worked out better for everything that's going on in the world and my life. So that's where I ended up. Well, great, congratulations.
I'm sure it's good to focus your energies into one place, one direction.
Yeah, and now with everything shut down in the state of Illinois, with no tap rooms being open or everything, I have the whole place to myself. So I'm in a giant German beer hall, giant German brewery, and no assistant or anything, doing all the brewing, all the cellar work myself, and kind of good that I'm focused all in one spot right now.
Well, you said kind of offhand last time, I said, hey, we should have you back on the podcast at some point. And you said, yeah, maybe we could talk about Dunkel. And I said, now that sounds fun. Now, is Dunkel one of your favorite styles?
It never really was the style that kind of stuck out at me until I started working at Hofbrau few years ago, and since then it's just especially the one that's made from Hofbrau, it's just become one of my favorite beers ever. The style, everything that goes into it is just a whole nother beast to brew. Decoction, mashing, all the fun stuff of that. So it's just become definitely like when I have a beer after work, it's the Dunkel.
Wow. And what makes it so good?
Just those complex, deep, chocolatey, toasty flavors, but still having that light-bodied, crisp lager. It just gives you that added boost from what you're expecting from a lager.
And what sets it apart from other dark styles, like say a porter or a stout? Could you tell blindfolded whether you were drinking one or the other?
Yeah, just from the body alone and that crisp finish, it's still so many lager qualities are still there, even with those added uh, complex dark malt flavors in there. That it definitely sets itself apart with body.
And I looked up the style on the Beer Judge Certification Program, the BJCP website, and it says, if I can read from this direction here on my computer, characterized by depth, richness, and complexity typical of darker Munich malts, with the accompanying Maillard products, deeply bready, toasty, often with chocolate-like flavors in the freshest examples, but never harsh, roasty, or astringent. A decidedly malt-balanced beer, yet still easily drinkable. So that kind of lines up with what you're saying. And it's probably the, not being too roasty probably is one thing that sets it apart from, say, a stout.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it'll still have quite a bit of those deep toast, probably closer to a descriptor than the roasty. Deep toast is probably closer there, but definitely some chocolate in there too.
And we don't want to give any trade secrets away. We're not going to give the recipe away on the podcast. But hopefully we can pry enough information out of you that we can, design our own homebrew recipe and develop an interesting beer, a delicious beer on our own. So what are the stats? Can you give us like the starting gravity and the finishing gravity and the sort of the ABV of the beer?
Yep. So we're shooting for around 12.7 Plato or 1051, and then trying to finish out at 2 Plato or around 1008, and so that brings us to around 5.7 ABV for the Dunkel.
So fairly drinkable.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, it's still a crushable lager. It's just got all that added complex flavor to it.
So let's talk about the malt bill. For the BJCP, it says the grist is traditionally made up of German Munich malt up to 100% in some cases, with the remainder German Pilsner malt. Small amounts of crystal malt can add dextrins and color, but should not introduce excessive residual sweetness. And it also says slight additions of roasted malts such as carafa or chocolate may be used to improve color, but should not add strong flavors. So does that kind of go along what you're thinking and what you're used to dealing with?
Yeah, that still pretty much lines up for what we're doing. Without giving too much away, we do use all German malts. Huge. I mean, at least 2/3 of our base malt is Munich malt, and then just very small amounts of roasted malts and caramel malts in there.
Yeah, I've done some 100% for the malt sampler. I did 100% 10 Lovibond Munich and even a 100% 20 Lovibond Munich, and the 10 Lovibond Munich was very drinkable. The 20 Lovibond was getting on the sweet side. It was
right.
a little much to be the entire malt bill. But you can tell that by balancing those out, and especially if you add some Pilsner malt in there to kind of what would you say the Pilsner malt's role would be in the malt bill?
Well, I mean, ours is because we're not using a standard Munich malt for our base. It is a higher Lovibond, so that's kind of balancing it back down to be a little lighter.
So to be a little bit more, I don't know, would you say biscuity or to add some or to cut into that?
I mean, ours is definitely focusing more on that bready, deep, toasty malt more than anything chocolate or caramel or any of that. That's those flavors are there, but they're definitely not masking that deep toast that we're going for.
And again, you're looking for drinkability, so something that's sort of syrupy sweet by having too much highly roasted malts or crystal malts, which have a lot of residual sweetness. That would knock down on that drinkability probably.
right? And we're doing a filter on our lagers, on our Dunkel even. So ours ends up not being a very deep, like a more American unfiltered Dunkels. Ours is a deep copper. I mean, it's not like a very black beer. It's ours is way more of a deep copper that you could still see through in your glass.
Huh. Yeah, I think in part of the description on the BJCP, it said something about ruby highlights or red highlights or something like that.
Yeah, I would definitely describe that in there.
And I'm assuming that hopping would be fairly concentrated on just the bitterness and not a whole lot of hop flavor and aroma.
Right. Yeah, the vast majority of the hopping is going to be just a bittering charge at the beginning.
Let's take a quick break from talking to Glenn for news from our friends and sponsors, Ricky and Kelly from Groenfell Meadery in Vermont. Ricky says they still have the Groenfell Winter Warmer in stock for a few more weeks. So now's your opportunity. This delicious winter seasonal is a nod to ancient tradition based on historic wassail. A collaboration with Runamuck Maple, the Groenfell Winter Warmer features sweet honey and maple syrup, bright blood orange with warm cinnamon, vanilla, nutmeg, and cloves. The Winter Warmer comes in 750 milliliter ceramic swing top bottles that would be awesome to ring in the new year with, in my opinion. So, also a portion of the sales goes to charity. If you live in the delivery area across the country, you can have the Groenfell Winter Warmer shipped directly to you, along with all the other delicious Groenfell and Havoc honey beverages. Check them all out at family-owned and operated Groenfell.com. That's GROENNFELL. Now, you mentioned the word decoction. Now, it seems like to me that's where this process gets really interesting. We've played with the decoction. We've put out a DVD, telling people the basics of a decoction recipe. And decoction is kind of controversial in that a lot of people, including Charlie Papazian, has said, that maybe decoction's not necessary. You could, add some, aromatic malt or something in there to, kind of mimic a decoction. But there are stalwarts like Michael Ferguson out there who appeared on this show at one of the homebrew cons after doing a presentation on decoction, and was actually able to pick the decocted beer out of a sampling of 3 different beers. So it's a little bit of a controversial topic, but in your opinion, is decoction worth all the effort?
Especially for this style. I can't speak on the other ones, but I mean, we just read the BJCP description, and that Maillard reaction, that product, is so much a part of this style that you kind of have to make it exactly this style.
Huh.
I'm not sure about other, I know a lot of people, especially Pilsner or Quell still doing decoction on their lager and things, or their Pilsner. But yeah, there's a lot of people that completely live by it. There's a lot of people that try to talk you out of it. I love that there is that in brewing, that people still can have extremely strong opinions one way or the other with how much science is behind it. I like, and there's so many different ways of doing decoction and things. Randy Mosher's Radical Brewing has several different ways of decoction. What I'm used to on a homebrew scale of decoction is completely different than what I'm used to on a commercial scale of decoction.
Huh.
So I think they do things for different styles, but specifically this Dunkel, if we weren't to do it, it wouldn't be the same beer. We would be able to tell. So
first of all, I guess to compare and contrast, what is your strategy on decocting for homebrew?
So the only one that I really do a decoction actually was, I had a Belgian Golden Strong that was kind of like a Duvel kind of clone recipe that we had passed down through the homebrew club that I was in, and I decided it was very much a step up mash that I decided one day during a a full club brew that we all did together, that I was going to do a double decoction with it. And it my process was, yeah, just normal homebrew decoction is, or what I'm used to is just taking about a third of the thick mash out, boiling it in a separate pot, and then adding it back in there to do your step ups. So that's what I'm familiar with, is just taking that thick part of the mash, trying to get it up to a sack rest, and then and doing that boil, adding it back in to raise the overall temperature up to your next mash rest, and then continuing until you have hit all your rests and mash out. Not so much the case on the professional side. This equipment is a lot different. So just having the extra pots and stovetop and things from homebrew is a lot more convenient than our system, which is, we're using a 30 hectoliter mash tun that is also the boil kettle. So we're mashing and boiling in the same vessel, and then a separate lauter tun. And our separate lauter tun isn't hooked up to any kind of heating source. It's just insulated. So anything that's being lautered in there cannot be heated up once it's in there. So separating mash and heating to different rests is a much different strategy for me on the big scale.
Huh. Now that's interesting. I'm assuming on the homebrew scale you start out at, say, around 120 degrees Fahrenheit or around 50 C for the first rest, and then through taking out that thick third of the mash and boiling it, you're hoping that you're getting up to those to the next rests, where you get into the activating those different enzymes to start breaking down those starches further.
Right.
Now, how does that work? I mean, if your mash tun is your kettle, how are you still boiling like a third of that mash?
So we're doing it a very different way. So we are mashing in, we're still mashing in around that 120, 122 Fahrenheit. We do a single step up from there before transferring a third into the lauter tun. So pretty much the exact opposite. Instead of taking out a third and boiling just that third, we're taking a third out and resting that in the lauter tun at that first step. Then we're doing 2 more rests of the main part of the mash, the other 2/3 in the boil kettle. Since that's the only kettle that we have that can raise temperature, we're doing 2 more rests in there until we get full conversion. And then after we have full conversion on that big 2/3, then we boil that 2/3 and then transfer that over in thirds into the lauter, raising that original temperature of mash in the lauter up steps that way.
Wow. So there's a lot going on at the same time. There's conversion happening with that first third in the mash tun when it's by itself there. And then there's, as you're raising the temperature in steps back in the boil kettle, which is also the lauter tun is where that first third is resting. The second 2/3 are in the mash tun, aka the kettle.
Exactly.
And so you're going up 2 more steps in there, and then transferring a third at a time back over into the lauter tun with that initial third. Have I just confused myself, or is that right?
Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna do the rest of our steps with that 2/3, and then we're gonna bring that full 2/3 to a boil, transferring a third of it at a time back into the lauter where that original third was, until we have hit the temperature steps in the lauter tun of that original. After that, once we've hit all of our steps in the lauter tun, then we bring the entire mash back over to the boil kettle for knockout for to hit that 171 for full conversion, and then we bring it all back into lauter and then actually lauter.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a lot of transfer back and forth. It's about an 8-hour brew day.
Wow.
With about 6.5 hours just on the mash.
That is one well-traveled mash.
Yes, yeah, and that's our system is to me I've been at 4 breweries at this point in my career, completely different brew system than anything that I'm used to. It's not steam jacketed. Our pumps and our hard piping is that to where we send it through a boiler. We transfer everything via pump and circuits through a boiler and heat things that way. So our actual kettles are not directly heating any of our mash or our wort.
Huh. So it's kind of a heat exchanger kind of a setup?
Right. Yeah, it's almost like a Herms type thing going on there.
Huh. So is that, that would give you sort of a gentler heating process than if you were to, say, have a direct fire kettle.
Right. Or even a jacketed kettle. Yeah. So on all of our beers, every single one of our beers, we have at least 4 steps on. We step mash everything. So there is no single infusion for any of our beers. They all have, even with having modernized malt, we still step mash everything.
Huh.
So with having it go through some kind of, indirect or opposite kind of heat exchanger like that, we're able to do it in very small increments at a time.
Now, step mashing is another controversial thing where, the theory is today our malts are all well modified, and so therefore step mashing is not necessary like in the old days. When the malts were not as well modified, and you basically had to do a step mash in order to do all the conversion that needs to be done with those grains. I guess in theory you could take those same recipes, those same ingredients. In the recipes that you use and do a single step mash and be just fine.
Yeah, that would be a great homebrew experiment right there, just to try all the different mashing techniques. Do one decoction, do one just standard step mashing, and then do one single infusion and see if you can pick out those different qualities that are happening from each one.
Yeah, I guess there's nothing. I was going to ask what you think all those steps bring to the process, but if you don't have anything to compare it to, a more simple process, there's no way for you to really know.
Yep, and that's definitely something I've thought about. Being coming from home brewing and definitely American home brewing background. When I got into Hofbrau as the first time I was there under my apprenticeship with a German brewmaster there. That was, I had always read, I had always heard that you don't need to step mash. You definitely don't need to do decoction if you don't believe in step mashing, things like that. And, to see, this company, Hofbrau is, international, been around so much longer than most American, probably all American breweries that are still around at this point. These recipes that have been handed down for so long, a lot of them are modernized. They are they're using labs, they're using scientific ways of testing their beer. I'm sure if they're still doing the step mashing for these beers to make them replicate these extremely old recipes that have been handed down, then there's definitely a reason that they're doing that.
Now, yeah, it's kind of a if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of a thing.
Right, but I'm also sure that these guys are also with the lab and the resources that they have are doing the testing, the side by sides, and definitely noticing a difference. I'm sure they've taken out steps that they found that they didn't need. I'm pretty sure all of the beers at one point were all decoction mashed, and now that they're only doing it with one, says that at least this style still needs it.
Germans have a reputation, of course, of being very efficient. So, maybe, with that in mind, maybe it takes a lot of energy to do all these steps. So maybe, if they weren't necessary, they would probably not do them, maybe.
They're equally as stubborn as they are efficient. So, I mean, it could go both ways.
So we've moved our mash all around the neighborhood and heated it up several times and raised it in varying places to different temperatures, and it all comes back together. I'm assuming back in the lauter tun, and you collect your wort. How long is the boil? And do you just hop at the beginning of that boil?
60-minute boil. Like I said, most of the hops are going to be just a bittering charge at the beginning of boil. There's a small one that's supposedly aroma and everything that's going to be kind of in the middle, towards the middle of the boil. And that's it. It's not a very hopped beer at all.
Yeah.
I don't have anything in front of me that would give me an IBU, but I can tell you that it is very low compared to definitely some of the other, even the Helles that we do. So not too hop focused, definitely a malt focused beer.
According to the BJCP, the IBUs range from 18 to 28. So, I mean, that's a fairly wide range, but,
Yeah, I would say ours is definitely more on the lower side of that.
And so anything at the end of the boil that's unusual, I'm assuming a whirlpool?
Yep. So we transferred over to a whirlpool. That's also another fun thing about our brewing system. Our whirlpool is in a separate room. So whenever we transfer our wort to the whirlpool, which is a separate vessel, it is, most modern American brewing systems, they just whirlpool in their kettle. But this is transferred over to a whirlpool in a separate room before it's chilled and then transferred into the fermenter. And we do everything double batch. So the same beer 2 days in a row. We pitch yeast on the first day, let it ferment and build up on its own, and then add the second amount of wort the second day without adding any yeast the second day. So we have 40 hectoliter fermenters outside. We do 20 barrel batches, or 20 hectoliter, batches. And that's how we ferment. And then again, I mentioned on the last one, everything is naturally carbonated. According to Reinheitsgebot, you cannot add additional CO2 to carbonate your beer. That is considered another ingredient. So whatever the beer produces, we're allowed to use, but we're not allowed to add anything else into it. So it will naturally carbonate under pressure using spunding valves, and we'll just hold pressure and build it up. I think for the Dunkel, it usually takes 12 to 14 days usually is the fermentation time on most of the lagers.
And what's the strategy on the temperature range? And is it just held steady at 1?
Yeah, for the lagers, they're definitely held steady at 1. We don't do any. We do a diacetyl rest at the end, but we don't really do any kind of other things that would speed up any kind of lagering or any speed up any fermentation. We also take a sample and do kind of a diacetyl test at the beginning whenever we collect the first total amount of wort. Once we have the 2 batches in the fermenter, we'll do a diacetyl test in a separate small container, and kind of that'll help us judge what terminal is going to be on that specific batch, and make sure that all the yeast is healthy and that it's going to kind of give us an idea of when to start doing pressure to start carbonating. And
I'm assuming you're using a clean fermenting lager yeast. in the process.
Right, and again, not to give anything away, but any kind of German clean strain that you get from a homebrew store is going to be really close to what we're using. A lot of the brands, when you look around at commercial breweries with lagers, they're all using right around the same stuff.
So when I've done some lagers and lager at lager quote unquote temperature, some of those lager strains really kick out a lot of sulfur compounds from the airlock. So does it get pretty sulfury around the fermentation chambers?
Oh yeah, it can definitely give off a smell there. I know whenever we first opened the brewery, and we were just fermenting like crazy because we have eight 40-liter hectoliter 40-liter fermenters in there, and yeah, they're all blowing off inside. So between having a couple batches of Hefeweizen going and then several lagers, the smells in there were definitely kicking out. That's for sure.
I've had emails from panicked homebrewers before. My airlock smells like sulfur. Is my beer ruined?
I opened the closet and it smells like eggs.
Yeah. Is my beer ruined? And I'd always quote Shrek and say, better out than in.
Exactly.
Better to kick that stuff out. So if you had missed your carbonation level with some sort of a malfunction with the Spunding valve, would it be within the rules or regulations to add some, say, fresh wort in there to to kick up the carbonation level?
So our last case scenario, which we almost never want to do, but if it comes down to we have flat beer for some reason, either a Spunding valve failing, or just not being, having a really healthy fermentation where we kind of misjudged when to start putting it on pressure. If something like that happens, the way we have to do it is to brew another batch, overcarbonate it, and then blend those two.
Ah, huh.
That's our way around flat beer, unfortunately.
So take care of your Spunding valves.
Exactly. Yeah. For many brewery that I've worked at, this one is definitely one where we check every day, twice a day, fermentation. And that I guess it was also a part of, just being an apprentice under a German brewmaster, trying to be taught all of the best practices that I possibly could, pick up good habits. Every morning, first thing we do when we come in is do all of our gravity testing, do pH every day, taste testing every time, and then last thing before we go home is do it again. So a lot of sampling, a lot of testing, constant, making sure that everything is flowing correctly, that we're not getting any kind of off flavors, that we are on pace with our fermentation for starting to put it on pressure and started to getting carbonated, to not overcarbonate it but not undercarbonate it. So a lot of attention put into checking on fermentation every day.
And of course, we didn't talk about water or water chemistry. Do you try to modify the St. Louis water chemistry to mimic something from back home, so to speak?
Yeah, so that's exactly what we do. We do have an RO system, but we don't have a lot of cold liquor storage. So what we do there is we do use St. Louis water, which obviously is great brewing water. But we start with that. We'll blend in RO water, and then we'll adjust from there anything else that is under to bring us to Munich standard additions.
Huh. How close is St. Louis water?
It's pretty close. I don't think we've ever really had to add many additions on their own. Usually it's if we're a little low, we'll just add some more city water back in. Again, it's chlorine filtered and everything, but it's pretty good.
Well, people have been brewing beer with St. Louis water for a little while now, so.
Yeah, I think they've been making some German and Bavarian beers there for a while too. So it must be good for something there.
There've been a few gallons. Well, cool. Is there anything that we've missed in talking about this style that maybe would inspire homebrewers to brew something similar?
Oh, not much. Again, treat it like a lager. So, give it the time to condition, give it the time to clear out. Any kind of filtering that you can do at home, either, obviously not Reinheitsgebot, but using gelatin and using biofine and things to really clear it up. That's when you're really going to get those crisp notes and that light body. I think that's the real difference maker in this beer from any other kind of dark beer. We have a lot of customers that tell us all the time that they are not dark beer drinkers, but they love the Dunkel. That's their favorite beer. So it's really treat it like a lager, keep it like a lager, get it nice and clear. Again, we can't use any of those easy way outs for that American brewers use for filtration. We use a diatomaceous earth plate filter that is the bane of my existence. I absolutely hate working with that thing. It is very manual, very finicky, keeping pressures, pump speeds. There's probably 16 different manual valves on it. It's very, very much a pain, but the way that makes that beer turn out in the end is phenomenal. I mean, that extra crispness, that extra lightness of the body from filtering out any kind of yeast, that's the real magic in the style.
Sounds like you need an apprentice to man the pumps.
That's what I was hired for. That was definitely my main role when I got in there was I'm not going to use that thing. You're going to use that thing. And it was a pain. And ours, we found out, after I started that ours didn't really work the way it was supposed to. But since neither of us had ever used one of that size, of that brand, I ended up having to go and train at the Hofbrauhaus in Chicago. And it was funny because I got in there and I just watched them do it once, and I was like, yeah, ours doesn't work like that. Ours is broken. Ours does not just run that smooth at all. And then they ended up having to come down and use ours, and they were like, yep, you're right. You're not lying. It's you need a different pump on this or something. It is not working right. So that was a real big pain. But yeah, it's a real fun, place to be. It's a lot different than any other American breweries that I've worked at. It's, having that extra history behind it and that extra process and attention with all the different steps definitely has given me a sense of, again, those good habits I learned under my apprenticeship of traditional brewing. A lot of them are so different from American other breweries that I've worked at, but there's a lot that I've been able to take away from a very traditional German brewery and use in great ways with American craft beer too. Well, excellent. I'm glad that you're sharing your experience with us, and now I'm thirsty. I know, and now I'm back in the Quad Cities here and 4 hours away, and I wish I would have brought a growler home with me. Well, excellent. It's been fun talking to you again, Glenn, and I hope we can find another excuse in the future. Excellent. Yeah, anytime. Appreciate it. Well, thanks again to Glenn. It sounds like he's having a lot of fun and learning a lot, working on those big toys there at the Hofbrauhaus. I bet that Dunkel is delicious. If you want to hear more from Glenn, he's got a podcast. Like, everybody has got but he's got a podcast called What's Tappening. So look that up on your podcast thingies. Remember, we're taking next week off, but Steve and I will be back the last week of the year for our annual disaster show, and I think it's going to be a really good one. If
If you have brewing questions in the meantime, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to James at basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way always. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. It's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. Talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well and stay tuned. So long.